This is Canada Talks Archery. Hi, I'm Kelly Taylor, and I'm your host. We're here to talk about anything and everything as it applies to archery, from compound and recurve to target and hunting. Canada Talks Archery is proud to have PSE Archery as its presenting sponsor. For quality bows for every application, when you want precision shooting equipment, trust PSE Archery. Check out PSE's latest bow, the Shootdown Pro. Contact your local authorized retailer or visit psearchery.com. Okay, so we're here at the 2023 Manitoba Provincial Indoor 3D Championships, and we're chatting with Alan Gunter, well-known archery coach and archer from years past. Alan, welcome to Canada Talks Archery.
Thanks for having me, Kelly.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. What's your experience in archery?
Well, I've had a bow in my hand since I was probably about 11 years old. I'm 36 now, so we can do the math on that one. I started to get into it for bow hunting and got involved in some competitions to prepare for that, and really fell in love with the competitive aspect of the sport, and really haven't looked back since. I've been competing on all kinds of different levels. I've been a national team member a couple of times, been to some world championships, nationals, all that kind of stuff. In recent years, I've kind of taken a little step back from the competitive side of things to get more into the coaching and that kind of stuff.
All right, so we want to talk about equipment today, and I know one of the things that a lot of people think is, I just need to buy this little gadget, or I just need to do this little tweak or stuff like that. And we know that you can't buy good form, but you can often buy bad results. How does that work?
Yeah, so picking the right equipment for the job that you want it to do is critical. For example, if you said, I'm just going to shoot indoor spots, indoor target, you want to look for probably the most forgiving platform you can find, which is going to be a big brace height, long axle to axle, smooth cam, generally speaking. But that same setup is not as good for a game like we're playing today at the 3D Provincials here, because it is slow. The bow I'm shooting right now for indoor target is 220 feet per second, and if you're off by a couple yards on your judging, or your sight tape is off a little bit, it's going to be a big difference. So you want to look for something that's got a little bit more speed for 3D. Same thing for hunting. You can pick the right and wrong bow very easily for hunting, just depending on what type of game you're hunting and the scenarios that you're looking at.
So let's talk a little bit about 3D, because that's what they're shooting here right now. One of the things that we've heard is that if you're judging, if you have a choice of judging on a yard over or a yard under, choose a yard over, because your arrow is going to rise less than it's going to fall by judging under. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, yeah. That's just simple physics.
In terms of once you've got your bow and you're trying to get it set up, what are some of the ways that you can think about draw weight, mass weight, holding weight, all those sorts of things that are going to be unique to every individual?
Yeah, each one of those things has its own little pros and cons, and everybody likes to have them set up a little bit differently. But again, there are certain aspects that you can look at depending on your shot style and the game you're playing. So holding weight, for example, as a general rule, this isn't for everybody, as a general rule, if you're shooting outdoor in the wind, especially the 50-meter stuff, a little bit more holding weight is probably going to give you a bit of an advantage, because the wind won't blow you around as much. It's not going to affect the string at full draw as much with a little bit more weight back there. You can also, with a little bit more holding weight, run a little bit more stabilizer weight. So there's a little bit of a balancing act there. So each one of those things, like I said, is sort of individual preference, but also will relate to the game you're playing.
Now, if I go to a big tournament like an ASA or something, and I see someone like Tim Gillingham with 56 ounces of weight on his bars, and think, oh, that's what I need, It's not necessarily the case, is it?
No, not at all. And that's it's very personal. It's very each individual person was going to have their preference. The first thing I would say is Is there an advantage to running some more weight? Possibly. Would I go throw 56 ounces of weight on my bow tomorrow? No. Those guys don't do it either. They'll add an ounce here, an ounce there, 2 ounces at a time maybe, and then eventually they get up to that weight. But don't just go throwing weight on your bow without working your way up there incrementally.
Right, because if you can't hold the bow steady, it's not going to work for you no matter how much weight you have on there.
Yeah, exactly. Like I run total ounces of stabilizer weight. I'm probably around 15 or so. And I shot Austin's bow when he was back in town over Christmas, and he's got like 50 ounces, and I couldn't hold that thing up to save my life.
I can barely pick up his bow to move it around the house, let alone hold it and shoot it.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, what about, if you're looking at a bow, say you're looking at the Dominator Duo or the Shoot Down Pro from PSE, and you see a bunch of different cam options available. What are some of the considerations that you need to make in terms of choosing the right cam for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. Similar to what we were talking about before, it's all going to depend on sort of your shot style and the game you're playing. Some of those cams are a little bit more aggressive, which is going to give you a little bit more speed. So for the 3D game, that's going to be an advantage. Some of them are smoother. They're going to be a little bit easier to draw, easier to hold back. The valley is going to be a little bit different. So it's again, personal preference, but there's a few ways that I would look at it depending on what game you're playing.
When we're looking at sights, there's all sorts of sights out there. There's hunting sights, there's slider sights, there's something like the XL XP Achieve with the the big long bar on it. What are the considerations there?
Yeah, most of the stuff that you're going to look at, if you're shooting competitively, you're going to want something with micro adjust. You're going to want something that probably locks down really easily, but also has a quick adjust, like a gang adjustment. On a hunting sight, you probably don't need the micro adjust. Some guys on a hunting site like multiple pins. I'm a single pin guy on my hunting bow. I shoot a Fast Eddie XL. It's got the dial, which is plenty accurate enough for what I'm doing in a hunting scenario. Is it accurate enough for what I'm doing on a competition field or in a indoor 3D or indoor target round? Probably not, because I'm trying to be as precise as I can, and that dial, you can get it pretty good, but if I need 2 clicks on my target sight, there is no clicks on the Fast Eddie. So it's a great sight, but it's not going to be as precise as some of those higher end micro adjust sights.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about arrows now, because arrows are a prime consideration. And indoor 18 meters, as long as you're not going too weak, spine's not a huge issue. But once you get outside, once you get into longer distances like the 3D shoot here, what are your considerations there?
Yeah, so indoors you can get away with a lot. You probably want the biggest diameter arrow that you're allowed to shoot for the category or tournament that you're shooting in. And speed is really not a factor. So shoot a big, big diameter, heavy point, all that kind of stuff. Big veins, big feathers, whatever. Get that arrow as stable as possible, as quick as possible. As soon as you go to outdoors, if you're talking about the 50 meter stuff, that same arrow is going to be the worst thing that you could shoot for that kind of thing, because it's going to drift in the wind. Big veins are going to get caught by the wind. Big diameter arrows are going to get caught by the wind. Slow is not going to be ideal. So you want a small micro diameter, something like an Easton X10 or a Black Eagle X Impact, something like that, and small veins. You've got more distance for that arrow to stabilize itself, so you don't need all the big vein on the back, and the smaller diameter arrow is going to get stabilized by a smaller vein as well. So choosing the right arrow for what you're doing is very critical, and that's where one spot where I think people could probably give themselves a little bit of an advantage is by having multiple sets of arrows and switching their bow setup a little bit from tournament to tournament. Have a set of arrows for 3D, have a set of arrows for outdoor target, have a set of arrows for indoor target. As far as cost goes, that's probably the one thing that you can do to give yourself an advantage. For the least amount of money rather than having bows for everything.
Now, let's talk 3-fletch versus 4-fletch.
That's a good question. That's something I'm experimenting with right now, and I would say that the jury is still out in my mind as far as what my results have been. I love the theory of 4-fletch because I think more drag on your arrow is going to stabilize your arrow quicker. That's why I shoot like a 4-inch feather for indoor target, because feather is going to stabilize your arrow quicker than a vane will. Do you have to refletch them more often? Yes, they're not as durable, all that kind of stuff, but that's a small sacrifice to me. So 4-fletch is definitely going to give you more drag. It's going to stabilize that arrow quicker, but it's also going to slow your arrow down a little quicker as well, and gives you a little bit more surface area to get caught by the wind and that kind of stuff. So I love the theory of it. I've yet to come to a conclusion as to whether I think it's super beneficial or not, but the theory is right. And
depending on the width of your rest, you may need to move to a fall away too.
Yeah, definitely. I'm shooting currently a 27 diameter arrow with the 4-fletch that I'm working on, and I'm shooting a blade rest, and I think I'm just barely getting away with it. So definitely, if you're going to shoot anything smaller than a 27 diameter arrow, I would recommend, if you're going to shoot 4-fletch, go to a drop away rest.
So that's another question that we can talk about now is the various rests that are out there. Mm-hmm. I mean, most of us, we started off shooting with fingers and a whisker biscuit. Yeah. Probably graduated to a fixed blade rest. So what are the differences between a fixed blade rest, the ability to micro adjust, a fall away rest, and how do we decide?
Great question. Fall away rests have come a long ways in the last, let's say, 5 to 10 years. Prior to that, there were inconsistencies in fall away rests and just the way they worked mechanically. I never really trusted them, so I've always been a blade rest guy. But like I said, in the last, let's say, 5 years, dropaways have come so far along that I think that they're right there in terms of which one's more accurate. I think they're probably equal. The thing with dropaway rests you want to look for is I'm a big fan of limb-driven dropaway rests, because I think they stay up longer and get out of the way faster and don't have as much bounce back as cable-driven dropaway rests. The limb-driven rests, I think, are just way more reliable, and at this point, I think it's kind of 6 to 1, half a dozen to the other between that and a blade rest.
And the idea is that you want it to be timed precisely so that the blade stays on the shaft as long as possible and drops just before the fletchings get there, right?
That's right. Supporting the arrow for as long as possible and then getting out of the way as fast as it can at the end.
So we've seen a bunch of different categories come into being. The latest one that we're trying in Manitoba is the modern bow hunter. Mm-hmm. Gives you a slightly longer stabilizer on the front, gives you the option of a stabilizer on the side. And target, we often see 28, 30-inch, sometimes 36-inch stabilizers. How do you choose? What's the consideration there?
Yeah, it's going to have a lot to do with your category that you want to compete in. So like hunter class, you got to be less than 12 inches. As far as length goes, choosing between a 28 and a 30 is kind of personal preference. One thing you want to look for, though, when you're buying a stabilizer is make sure you get something that's stiff enough that's going to handle the amount of weight that you do eventually want to put on there. Like these guys like Austin and Tim Gillingham and Mike Schlosser and guys like that are running all kinds of crazy weight on their stabilizers. They need something that's going to be stiff, that's going to not act like a wet noodle when you put 30 ounces on a front bar.
The wet noodle effect is going to completely negate any benefits of having a stabilizer.
Exactly, yeah. It makes it completely, you might as well not have it on there. So if you're just looking at running 5 or 6 ounces on the front of your bar, you can get away with a stabilizer that's not as stiff. In terms of accuracy, you don't need any kind of rubber sound or vibration dampening components on there. Do they make it feel a little bit better? Yeah, probably, but they're not going to add anything for accuracy. And then stabilizer weights, you can get all kinds of different things. You can get the tungsten weights now. You can get bigger diameter Like I've got some 4-ounce shrewd weights that are like thin diameter, but like almost like a pie plate on the front of your stabilizer. And that's great. Again, for indoors, that's fine. But outdoors, more surface area on the front is going to act like a sail. So you might not want that big surface area. So it's just thinking about, again, what are you doing? What do you want the stabilizer to do? And kind of look at the different options from there.
Would you say that the best shape for outdoors would be a pure cylinder rather than, some of those old blade style rests, or the one with like the 4...
like the biter stabilizer.
Yeah.
I don't know the actual science on that, but like I think it's fairly well proven that a cylinder style, a tubular style stabilizer shape is going to be just as good as anything else. Those blade ones were a nice idea, but I don't think they were as stiff, so you couldn't add the weights to them. But the biter ones, again, I used to shoot a biter way back in the day, but weight-wise, you could not add the weights that you can to some of the things that are available out there now.
All right, so last question. Like most aspects of life, people have to set a budget for what they're getting. And let's assume they've got a bow and they're looking to spend a little bit of money to improve their setup. What are some of the key things you'd suggest they look at?
Well, yeah. So if you've got a bow and let's say you've got a few dollars and you want to get one piece of equipment that's going to help you out the most, I would start with a sight. A good sight is going to make a huge difference. The beautiful thing about all the accessories is that you can put them on the bow you currently have, and then one day, you say I want to upgrade my bow. Well, all those accessories can transfer over. So get better accessories, start with better accessories, and work your way up from there. So I would go sight first. After that, I would get a good rest, and then stabilizers, and kind of work your way out from there. But first thing, get yourself a really good sight, because that's going to be a game changer.
Well, I mean, especially if you're at a tournament, we don't necessarily have time to dig out the Allen wrench to loosen the screws on some of the less expensive sights and move those around. You basically just want to grab the knob and turn it. So that's a key consideration. The other consideration is a scope.
Yep.
What do you recommend in terms of lens, no lens, what strength magnification, and do you put a clarifier in your peep?
So we'll start with the clarifier thing, because that's an easy one for me to answer. I personally believe that if you can get away without a clarifier, you should not use a clarifier whenever possible. The reason for that is that indoors it doesn't matter, outdoors when it's sunny it doesn't matter, but if you get a raindrop on your clarifier lens in your peep sight, it is game over. You are taking an Allen key and you're taking that lens out or taking the Q-tip and trying to soak out the water from there. It is a disaster if you get a raindrop in there.
Whereas if you don't have a clarifier, you just blow it out and it's done.
Absolutely, exactly. So whenever possible, don't use a clarifier, in my opinion. Now, everybody's eyesight is different, so if you need a clarifier, run with it, and you just have to know what your plan is if you get a raindrop in there. Carry a cotton ball, carry something that you can absorb the water out with in a second, kind of thing. So as long as you know what your game plan is, you'll be fine. In terms of scopes and lens powers and stuff like that, it's very much personal preference, again, because everybody's eyesight is different and everybody likes their sight picture to look a little bit different. I run a 4 power. I used to run a 6 power, and I've considered going back to it. It's all a matter of personal preference and what you like your sight picture to look like. So if possible, I know it's not always doable, but whenever possible, go to a pro shop, go to a local pro shop and see if you can put a 4 power lens on your bow and try it out. And then try a 6 power and try an 8 power. 8 power is a lot. Not too many people are going to shoot an 8 power successfully, but it can be done. So if you don't have that option, I would stick with 4 power. It's kind of the happy medium. So if you don't have access to all the different things to be able to test them out, I would suggest going to the 4 power. I don't think you're going to be disappointed greatly.
Would you say that a higher power lens, the main consideration there is, one, how stable you can hold your bow, and two, your tolerance for the pin moving around and still getting a good execution of your release?
Yeah, that's exactly it. So the more magnification you have, not only is it going to magnify the target for you, which is nice, that's what we want, but it's also going to magnify what your sight picture looks like. So if you have a little bit of a wobble with a 4 power, that 8 power is going to make it look like you're moving more. You're not actually moving anymore. It just looks like it. So if your mind can accept that extra visual cue of movement, then go for it. But some people will get target panic and stuff from that extra movement, and therefore probably shouldn't shoot that higher power.
Okay, very good. Well, Alan Gunter, archery coach, experienced archer, experienced bow technician. Thanks very much for being on Canada Talks Archery.
No problem. Thanks for having me, Kelly.
So we're joined now by Canada's newest archery entrepreneur, Brady Haslam of X-Shot Archery. Brady, welcome to Canada Talks Archery.
Yeah, thank you. Glad to be on here, Kelly.
So give us a rundown on how you decided to get into the lens business.
Well, I got into archery to originally start bow hunting, and so I was shooting my bow, and then I heard about this thing called 3D archery that I had never really heard of, and people kept talking about it like I knew what it was. Finally went home and Googled it and watched some videos, and then a little bit of research later, I realized that all the good guys use a lens. And then so I went back to the shop and I was like, hey, I need to buy a lens for 3D. And they're like, okay, that'll be $200-300. And then I thought, wait a second, I'll bet I could do that. And then I just went back to my office the next day and did a little bit more research and started experimenting and trialing some different things. And then I figured it out, and yeah, the rest is history.
So what is unique about your lenses?
Well, I mean, I'll be real honest with you. A lens is just a piece of material that bends light. And so in that aspect, there's nothing really special about my lenses. They do the same thing as everybody else's, but we're from Canada, and we make a pretty high quality lens in terms of clarity and other types of optics. And so, yeah, I mean, there's nothing inherently special about my lens, but I think we're able to offer extremely high quality lenses at a pretty darn reasonable price. And so, yeah, that's probably the biggest thing that sets our lenses apart. Yeah.
And how has the reaction been?
I feel it's been very well received. You know, I'll tell you a secondhand story. So, just a few months ago, and I'll try to leave out names, or maybe I'll say the names and we can edit them out later. But basically, there was a shoot a couple months ago, and this is when. So I've been making lenses for people in Medicine Hat, which is where I'm from, for the past couple of years. And then it wasn't until about a year ago where I decided, well, I could make a real thing of this. And so I went to a shoot, my first shoot under the X-Shot banner, where we had some actual advertising and stuff. And I'll never forget, there's a good friend of mine, Joel Bruger from Firewire Custom Bowstrings. Really good archer, really good friend.
And really quality bowstrings too.
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, there's not a better one out there. Anyways, but he's been helping a lot out with X-Shot Archery, and we brought him into the mix a little bit with it. Not a little bit. He's in with X-Shot Archery. And anyways, at this shoot at Ironman, there was a shooter. There's a big bunch of people, probably 4 or 5 really good shooters, top-notch shooters in Canada. And to be honest, I was a little intimidated by him. And so Joel, being Joel, he knows all these guys, and he went up to him and he said, "Hey guys, just try the lens." And you got to remember, all these guys, they're already sponsored by some pretty big names, some really well established lens companies. And so what happened is he convinced them just to try the lens. And I'm sure we all know Clinton Lease, really great guy, really fantastic shooter. But when he's down to business, he's down to business, right? And so he's got a shooting face on. And of course, this is all comes from Joel's mouth. So I didn't see this happen, but Joel watched him. He pulled back a bow with my lens in it, and that stone face concentration look, he just got a little grin. And as he looked through my lens. And so that's when I kind of knew that we might be onto something big here. And then we, right at that shoot, a lot of really talented shooters wanted to try, and yeah, started shooting my lenses, and so couldn't be more happy. So yeah, I think very well received so far.
So onward and upward from there, I guess, right?
That's the plan. I'm hoping.
So you were just at the Canadian 3D Indoor Championships. You had a booth set up there. How'd that go?
It was really good. So at that point, that was about the third shoot that we had been to in the past couple months. And so a lot of shooters were already shooting our lens, which we're very grateful for. But one really neat thing that, again, Joel had the idea for is, because for people to try the lens, that's our motto, right? See what you've been missing. And it kind of gets a little cumbersome to take their lens out of their scope and put our lens in and then pull it back. And then we might have to change a peep or a clarifier or something like that. And then to compare, put the other one back in. So we got these Genesis bows, and there's 3 of them, and we have a different lens set up in each one, and a different clarifier kit for each one of them. And so probably the coolest thing about the national shoot was people would come up and they say, "Hey, I want to try your lens." And so I just grabbed these Genesis bows, and we could basically mimic the shooter's exact specifications, right? The biggest thing being the distance from their peep to the scope housing. So we get that right just to get it set up just like their bow would be set up. And then we just say, "Hey, here's a 6X lens in our lens. Look through it, and then look through yours." And it was just really quick because you could compare lenses real quick that way. So that was a real neat thing. Spent a lot of time with a lot of kids, right? Kids were trying to learn how to, some of them were a little too young for a lens, but some of them, it's the first time shooting a lens. And that was a really good way to help those kids find what power they need with what clarifier, because it can be a little overwhelming, right? Sometimes you get a lens and sometimes a certain clarifier doesn't work that you think will work. And so instead of buying, all the clarifiers, we could find out exactly what power they needed and exactly what clarifier they needed, which is, I think, pretty helpful for a lot of those kids.
Right. So what prices do your lenses run at?
So our standard lenses run at $99.99, and then our premium lenses go for $169.99.
Which is still a bargain compared to some of the other lenses on the market.
Well, I think so. Especially with the feedback that we've been getting, it's, we're getting some really positive feedback compared to some other really high-end lenses out there. So, it's a great price, I think.
So are you able to fit lenses into most of the scopes on the market now, like UltraView, Optum, Nomad, those ones from Shrewd, and UltraView and Excel and all those?
Yeah, so basically every scope on the market we can do. So probably the biggest ones out there, no surprise, are the Excel AV and AVX 31 and 41s, and the UltraViews are real popular. Shrewds are really popular. But yeah, bow fingers are also really popular. But yeah, from Spot Hog, B3, HHA, basically all of them. In fact, there's this new company, Dialed Archery, that we just started making lenses for also. But yeah. So we can make lenses for anything, even some of the more custom ones like the CCS scopes. Those are a little bit trickier, but we can get those made for those ones also.
Do you have lenses drilled, like the UV drilled lenses?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I was hoping you might not ask me that, but so the long answer, well, the short answer is yes, I do. But the long answer is I don't advertise it yet because right now, with our manufacturing process, we're having inconsistencies with where that hole is drilled. And so, like, we're talking that hole is drilled within 0.5 millimeter of the center of the lens every time. But until it's 100% in the center of the lens, I'm not going to start advertising it. So if people ask me for a center drilled lens, I kind of explain that, yeah, I do it. You might have to do a click up, down, left, right, or whatever with your micro adjust to recenter it. But yeah, that's kind of the spiel that I give them. And if they're okay with that, then I'll make it for them.
Okay, so do you make the lenses yourself, like in your own shop, or is this something that you've worked with another company on?
So that's another complicated question. So basically, I would say, okay, I know what I want in a lens, and so there's lens companies that mass produce lenses, and so I say I want these specifications in a lens. Made out of this material, this design, start making them for me. And they come in these big lens blanks, basically about that big. And then I cut them down to fit into whatever scope housing they have.
Okay, sweet. All right. Anything else you want to add? The anything else you want to add is going to get edited out. I just
Oh, yeah. No, I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, I guess the only thing I can think of right now is, I mean, I'm not sure if this is corny or not, but I would just like to express some gratitude to some really key people in this process. So my wife, number one, because I have a day job, right? So I got to like do my normal optometry stuff, and then when I get home, I'm oftentimes doing X-shot stuff, and so she's been extremely patient with me. So she gets a shout out. Joel Bruger, awesome guy to work with. Just couldn't be happier with him. And then of course all the shooters that have taken a chance on me, right? Because us being a new company, not trust with very little exposure in the field, very little history and background. I mean, it was a big leap for some of these guys to drop their current lens sponsors and come on with me. So, and every single one of my shooters is amazing. I mean, they're just fantastic shooters, fantastic people. But yeah, that's, if I had to add anything, it would be that.
All right. Well, thanks to Joel, I've got an X-shot archery lens in my scope. I'm loving it so far. So
yeah, how's it working?
Well, it hasn't helped me shoot any better, but at least I can see where I'm missing.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay, Brady Haslam, X-shot archery. Thank you very much for being on Canada Talks Archery.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me, Kelly.
That's it for another episode of Canada Talks Archery. I'd like to thank our guests, Alan Gunter and Brady Haslam. I'm Kelly Taylor, your host, and I'll be looking for you next month on Canada Talks Archery.